Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your daily dose of structured and smart current affairs for UPSC preparation. It's June 30th, 2025 and today's edition brings two deeply relevant analyses for your mains 2025 examination. So we begin with a look on the twin disasters, a recent landslide and a Stampede event, and what it teaches us about disaster preparedness and crowd management. Then we turn to the ecological renewal of the Western Ghats, understanding its ecological significance and ongoing conservation effort. And finally, in our Prelims 2026 oriented simplified section, we will be covering key updates ranging from the National Commission for Women to recently India being declared Trachoma-Free by WHO. So let's begin. Be it the Air India crash, to the flash floods in Himachal Pradesh, to the Char Dham Yatra landslide and the stampede at Puri's Rath Yatra, this month has been full of disasters, both natural and anthropogenic disasters. So that is why from the disaster management perspective of our GS3, we need to talk about the basics of the same and about how our disaster preparedness should be in such times. So let us start with the very first one, the first tragedy that took place in Uttarakhand in the form of a landslide. Now firstly, let us understand the very basics. Let us do our revision, because whenever we are writing any questions, we definitely have to understand the definition. Now when we talk about the landslides, they are mass movements of particles, be it dust, boulders, big rocks, down a slope under the influence of gravity. So when we talk about landslide, they are generally caused due to the steepness of slope, the heavy weathering of materials over the mountains. Also, when we talk about earthquakes or various other movements such as winds, such rocks come under the gravity influence and they generally go down the slope and they cause havoc. And at the end of the day, we also have climate change recently which has been causing such incidents due to increased amount of global warming. Recently we have increased amount of precipitation, and this precipitation is much more prominent at the slopes of the mountains, and this carries down the boulders and the rocks and the dust and the particles down the slope, generally causing destruction along the entire villages and the towns in those regions. And when we talk about landslides and the losses and some of the data, according to Indian landslide susceptibility map, 13.17% of India, that amounts to around 0.42 million square kilometers of the country, is actually prone to landslides. And if you can look at this map here, we generally have four areas, four zones where we witness most of the landslides. They are the northern and the eastern Himalayas. Then we also have the Western Ghats. And here, when we talk about the same, between 2015 and 2022, there have been around 3,782 landslides. When I talk about one particular state such as Sikkim, more than 50% of Sikkim is prone to landslides. So this is the seriousness of this event that we have to keep in mind. Also, on a global scale, India accounts for 8% of the global fatalities that run to around 4.8 million people affected by landslides and 18,000 deaths caused by landslides globally, and India attributes 8% of the global casualties. Also, when we talk about the hit of landslides to our gross national income, that comes to be around 1 to 2%, almost equivalent to our health education budgets. Right? And also, when I talk about the vulnerability of India, we also have to understand that the western and the northwest Himalayas, they are much more intense, or say the landslides here are much more intense when we talk about the number of fatal events and also the number of people killed. After that, we have East and Northeast India, and finally we have South India, including Maharashtra. So this is where the landslide vulnerabilities are in the country. And when we talk about the recent one, we have to understand some of the reasons why Uttarakhand is actually seeing a lot of landslides in the recent times. As you can see, this was actually a video of the debris flowing down from the slopes of the recent landslide here. But when we look at the map here of Uttarakhand, this is the landslide map, we find generally that landslides are concentrated in the northern part of Uttarakhand, followed by mainly the central parts here. And when we talk about the central parts, we have to understand the various reasons behind the same. Firstly, we cannot ignore the climatic factors in recent times, because over a period of time we have seen how the Himalayan regions are becoming extremely fragile because they are bearing the brunt of climate change. And when we talk about the climate change, be it from the melting glaciers, which also cause landslides, be it the heavy rainfall which is causing immense amount of, say, debris coming down, or be the unsustainable kind of agriculture which is causing soil erosion, loosening the soil. And you know that whenever soils become loose, the debris become much more dense and they flow down with much more ease. So that is why we have to understand that in recent times also, the cloudburst incidents which took place right now in Himachal Pradesh, they are also attributed to the same, because in such a short span of time during cloudbursts we see immense amount of rainfall. Next, in recent times we have also seen how the urban areas in the Himalayan regions have proliferated, have encroached upon the natural ecosystems, which is leading to the reduction in the natural bearing capacity of the ecosystem there. Next, when we talk about the infrastructure, we cannot ignore the amount of roads, the highways, the infrastructural facilities being constructed in the Himalayan regions. While that is good, obviously we need more amount of tourism for the region, because a lot of Himalayan states, especially Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, even Jammu and Kashmir, they depend a lot of their livelihood on the tourists like us. So unless we do not go there, they do not have a proper amount of sustainable livelihood. But when we talk about the infrastructural development in this region, it is highly unsustainable. You know, in recent visits to various Himalayan states, I have found out that the local people are not at all happy when we talk about the local destruction of the ecosystem due to flying dust from construction highways, due to too much construction of hotels and various other industries related to tourism. So that is why we see that despite being in a seismic zone 5, which means that it is quite an earthquake prone region, right, which makes it already a prone region for landslides. On the top of that, we have unsustainable tourism. We have too many roads, and these roads sometimes do not have proper amount of protocols being followed for their construction. And at the end of the day, there are so many resorts, there are so many hotels which do not take proper environmental clearance, or they do not undergo proper environmental impact assessments. The same case is for various industries there, right? Now let us move on to the next factor here. In this recent event, we have seen how there have been several casualties attributed to the labor force working towards the construction of some important facilities in the region of Char Dham Yatra route. Their lives have been lost. Why? Because they were having shelter beside an hillside, and the construction workers did not have proper facilities for shelter because they were just making their camps in the region. And finally, at the end of the day, the disaster governance, or say the overall administration, was also to blame for this matter, because there have been so many past incidents. Government must have collected the data, must have gained experience. Next, also when we talk about the preparedness time for such landslide events, for such cloudburst events, have not been properly adhered to. There have been, lapses in the prediction of these landslides, right? The real-time weather alerts, while we have sophisticated supercomputers, we have satellites deputed for the same, we are still not able to pinpoint the prediction of heavy rainfall events and the subsequent landslide events. If we do that, maybe the lives could have been saved. Next, when we talk about disasters, we are not only talking about predicting the disasters and saving lives. Obviously, when we talk about any disaster, after its occurrence, the most important part is evacuation. So, it has been seen in recent times that despite the disasters which have been taken for hours, right, the evacuation team sometimes do not reach on time. That also reduces the scope of survival for many. And at the end of the day, the ecologically sensitive areas which have been highlighted by various committees according to the various state governments in these ecologically sensitive areas, these policy guidelines have sometimes not been followed through. So these are all the reasons which we have witnessed this tragedy. Now coming to the second one, that is a Stampede event which took place at Gundicha temple at Puri during the famous Rath Yatra. While Rath Yatra is a very sacred festival not only for Puri but for entire world, we see mass gatherings during Rath Yatra at Puri. So that is why we have to understand that crowd management is extremely important, because in this event there have been lots of lives which have been lost, and obviously we have also to understand that in such events which are known as Stampede, these events are growing in instances in recent times. When it comes to the recent one which I can remember is the infamous Hathras Stampede event. Stampede is nothing but, when we talk about crowd management, it is actually the failure of crowd management, because in temples, at fairs, at various other say important public events such as even concerts in India and abroad, we have seen that how the administration has time and again failed to properly manage the crowd, right? And here we have also to understand that according to IJDRR, according to a 2013 report which is quite outdated, which also shows that we have outdated data regarding Stampede events. So according to the 2013 data, 79% of the Stampede events and the casualties have taken place at religious mass gatherings, and this is the data over the last 70 years. So that is where we have to attribute to the main causes of such Stampede events. Firstly, obviously we have structural issues. At various venues and places, we do not have proper structures built to contain the crowds. Be it a temple, be it a concert, be it at various other open and even closed public places, those organizations, the buildings, the architects, while they are planning, they do not properly follow structural things because they are always looking at cost-cutting incidents. Next, when we talk about the Stampede events, whenever such huge rush of people go for any religious event or any other purpose, we see that in cases of any untoward incident or in cases of such Stampede events, the authorities are also not having a proper coordination between them. Be it the temple authorities, be it the consort authorities, or be it various other government authorities, the local police, the volunteers, the NGO members, they do not have a proper unified platform where they can swiftly respond to such events. Next, we cannot only blame the government, right? Always we have to keep in our mind when it even comes to climate change, when it even comes to various political decisions, and even towards disasters mainly, people are always somewhere to blame, right? The crowd behavior at various other places are sometimes erratic, and this means that we have to specially talk about the crowd training protocols also. Next, there are security lapses. There are various instances where we have seen that proper security forces are not present, due to which they are not able to manage the event on time, and at the end of the day, due to various other incidents, right, these are the other related factors such as fire, such as electricity, and issues between them, which make the people panic and run and actually lead to such disasters. And that is where we have to right now understand some common challenges that India faces in disaster management. We have seen, right, the two cases where one is a natural disaster and another one is an anthropogenic disaster. Now these two kinds of disasters actually pose some true realities for the countries, because India over a period of time has been seeing so many disasters, and that is why let us look at some challenges briefly. Firstly, the infrastructural fragility. Right, we have looked at these various events, right, from a landslide to a stampede. Infrastructure is extremely important, right? When we talk about the houses, the public places, and when we talk about the various events that destroy this kind of infrastructure, that shows the fact that our infrastructure is not disaster resilient. Disaster resilience means that whenever we are having any home construction, whenever we are having any building construction, when we are constructing a road, that road must not cause any negative side effect on the environment. that particular road, that particular public place must be adhering to public safety protocols, be it the case of fire safety, be it the case of emergency exits. So those things must be properly adhered to when we talk about disaster management as a whole. Next, when we talk about the institutional coordination gaps, these gaps remain because be it the National Disaster Management Authority, which is the prime authority for overseeing and managing the various protocols regarding disasters in the country. So the coordination with the district disaster management authority, the state disaster management authority, and even at the local level when we were talking about coordinating with the municipal bodies, with the Gram Sabhas, that is quite poor. Next, early warning systems. We cannot ignore this when we are talking about disasters, right? We have sophisticated satellites. We have computers which run into millions of rupees. Still, that is not enough as of now to warn us about various disasters, right? The government has taken so many steps in recent times to automate SMS alerts, to even let you know via your phone, via an emergency response alert on your phone devices. But still that we are quite behind when it comes to disseminating alerts in the remote areas of our country. When we talk about the urban areas, that is quite manageable at times. We have seen how that also collapses, but in remote areas, we are seeing various events of mismanagement. Next, obviously, when we talk about public awareness, the public are sometimes not aware of the evacuation protocols, which makes it much more difficult. Next, when we talk about the local body involvement, as we have already seen in the institutional gap, the Gram Sabhas, the municipal bodies are much more better equipped to handle disasters at the local level. But at the end of the day, the staff is not properly trained, or sometimes the funding is also an issue, as we can see here. Over a period of time, as you can see, from 2019 to 2024, the disaster grants have been reducing over a period of time. And also when we talk about the states, right, they have also seen reduction in their allocations. Correct. So we have seen that how this funding can directly impact the coping of any disaster. And at the end of the day, we also try to neglect non-natural disasters, right? For example, say the recent industrial incidents you can mention in the comments, right? And also the biological threats that we have. These are kind of non-conventional disasters, but we need to have steady protocols in place due to our booming economy. And at the end of the day, the funding and the CSR gaps are also eminent, as we have seen in the case of funding, right? Also, the private sector has a role to play, right? But when we talk about utilizing the CSR funds, sometimes these funds are not allocated properly to the disaster management protocols. And that is why we have some recommendations for combating landslides. Here, firstly, we need to strengthen our early warning systems, right? We need to have proper real-time satellite communication, and we need to develop the real-time landslide early warning systems that we have to develop. And also, if you can look at a recent software, right, we have a landslide information software which is actually pioneered by the government of India in collaboration with the various private institutions, right, which will be helping us reduce the various losses in lives and property, right, which will be actually working through satellite data and mainly for the hilly areas. Next, we need to have proper climate resilient infrastructure in the form of slope stabilization. Also, we need to have proper gabion walls where we have to use mesh nets across the entire slopes, and we also need to have geotagging of various places at the prominent pilgrimage areas such as Char Dham Yatra. Next, we need to have risk sensitive land use planning, such as we need to ban construction in such areas where it is extremely ecologically sensitive and extremely prone, right? We should not be constructing roads or resorts in those areas. We need to update our maps, right, according to the recent hazards, because climate change is an evolving thing. Because here we see that due to more instances of global warming, we are seeing new instances of such events. Next, we need to build capacities of local response team in the form of rescue kits, training, and releasing SOPs. We also have to pre-position the NDRF, the SDRF forces, right, before such disasters. Next, we need to have pilgrim safety protocols in place, because Char Dham Yatra, even the Amarnath Yatra in recent times are actually in the hilly areas where we need to have proper amount of protocols for their safety. So that is why we cannot only talk about the government here alone. We have to bring in the NGOs, we have to bring in trained experts from the civil community known as pilgrim route marshals, who are expert local people here who can help them. And at the end of the day, ecologically sensitive disaster management is the need of the time via properly adhering to the environmental impact assessments and following the recommendations. Now, when we talk about the Stampede incidents and what to do about them, firstly, these are from the National Disaster Management Guidelines. We have to have proper comprehensive cloud management, where we have to have a manual and a document and proper CCTV cameras to monitor the real-time crowd movement, right? We have to have proper event approval, risk assessment, integrated planning and risk reduction measures as shown here according to NDMA guidelines, right? Next, when we talk about the entry and exit of those events, of those public events, we need to have RFID wristbands for people so that their movement can be tracked, and in cases of any erratic or in case of any abnormal movement, the authorities can take action. Also, various entry-exit barriers must be in place to manage too much of crowd inflow and outflow. Next, real-time communication with the public must be held via loudspeakers, via LED TVs, right, to make them informed. And the mass casualty preparedness index must be prepared, where availability of first aid boxes, ambulances and various other health devices must be there at spot. Even the doctors and the nurses must be there in cases of any untoward incidents. Accountability of legal deterrence must be ensured via third-party audit reports, where the government must be assigning to the private sector to take the stock of disaster preparedness. And we also have to undertake devotee education and participation by roping in the religious leaders and various prominent leaders, the volunteers, to make the people aware of the crowd management protocols so that the people can actually listen to them and act rationally. So, according to the discussion, you attend this question here, you mention me in the comments and we can discuss on the improvements. Now, on to the next one. The next article is an extremely important one from an extremely important individual, that is Madhav Gadgil. The Madhav Gadgil is a noted environmentalist who is known for his works on the Western Ghats preservation. So, he is writing on the same, that we need to have an ecological renewal of the Western Ghats, and the only way here is via decentralizing the powers to the local bodies in this area so that they can actually take forward the reforms. So let us look at it from the perspectives of environment, climate change, conservation and environment impact assessment. Now, when we talk about the relevance of Western Ghats for your mains, there have been so many mains PYQs in this particular topic. So that is why we are going to briefly talk about Western Ghats, introduce the various challenges, and finally talk about the novel case study which has been given by Mr. Gadgil here. Now, when we talk about the Western Ghats, we know that they are spread across Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. And in the comments you let me know in which state we find the highest extent in terms of area of the Western Ghats. When we talk about the area, it covers around 1.4 lakh square kilometers and having a length of around 1600 kilometers. That is quite long. That quites to the almost the end of our country. According to various geologists, they posit that the Western Ghats were actually formed during the breakup of the supercontinent of Gondwana, right? So this was actually one of the main reasons here. And when we talk about the various important features in this area, we have the west flowing rivers, extremely important for your prelims examination, in the form of Periyar, right? Netravati, Sharavati, Mandovi and Bharatapuzha. Also, the east flowing rivers emerge from here in the form of Godavari, Krishna and Kaveri, and also their tributaries. These are extremely important facts for your prelims examination because there have been several questions mainly on the rivers emanating from the Western Ghats. So here, when we talk about mainly the problem here which has been discussed in this editorial, it is actually about the flawed forest governance. Now, we can actually understand that over a period of time, the Western Ghats have faced various issues, and those issues have made it extremely fragile. Now here in this, the 5 reasons firstly can be attributed to the unregulated development and heavy amount of mining and heavy amount of hydropower dams and urbanization in the region. We know that the Western Ghats is actually prone to various landslide events, and in cases of such unsustainable development, those landslide events even increase over a period of time. And this has been seen in the recent Wayanad landslide event too. Right? And when we talk about the mining instances, when we talk about the hydro dams, right, they are not sometimes constructed with proper environmental clearances. Next, the over tourism factor is a very huge major reason. When we talk about the habitat value of this particular region of Western Ghats, it has reduced over a period of time. Because when we talk about the local habitat of so many creatures who live here, starting from the Nilgiri tar to even the Royal Bengal tiger, now their habitat has been encroached upon by the various resorts and various other tourism sectors. Next, climate change is obviously a very big factor. When we talk about the increasing amount of precipitation, the landslide events, all of these are attributable to climate change and the changing rainfall pattern. And at the end of the day, monoculture is actually reducing the value of the soil in the region. Now, when we talk about the main problems which has been discussed by Mr. Gadgil here, he talked about outdated and distorted forest data that the forest department is using there from 1970s. Right? So this data is quite outdated, and that is why we need new data on actually the extent of the forest in the region. Also, when we talk about the forest departments and their failures that actually run into the overexploitation of the bamboo workers because they are not getting proper payments, and also the private sector is exploiting the bamboo planters and giving them less remuneration for their products. Next, when we talk about the destruction of natural forests, right, we actually mean that this has been encroached upon by various factors. But the thing is that the ecological restoration is taking a lot of time, because according to two committees, the two committees of Mr. Gadgil and Mr. Kasturirangan, both of them actually agreed that the Western Ghats are an ecologically sensitive areas. That is why we need to demarcate some regions. For example, say Gadgil committee told that the entire region is ecologically sensitive and we need to have urgent zonal gradation of the region. And that is where all such activities such as construction, tourism and every other activities must be immediately halted. Now the government of the day thought that okay, this report is quite strict in its norm, we need to also take development together, and that is why Kasturirangan report later recommended that 37% of the Western Ghat is actually ecologically sensitive and there must be moderate ban on mining and eco-sensitive zoning with development. But we have to understand that despite these recommendations, the destruction of the natural forests in those areas of the entire Western Ghats have not been undertaken. Even there have been several cases of pollution disasters, right, such as the Grasim Rayon factory, which is poisoning the local river of Chaliyar. And this particular river is extremely polluted due to various industrial activities. And not only this one, there have been so many other rivers too. And that is why when we talk about the government taking some actions, firstly, let us look at Panchgaon. Panchgaon is known as the millionaire village because there are lots of entrepreneurs, mainly from bamboo sectors, from various other sectors, right, who are doing excellent work and they are trying to transform the natural resources into gold mine. Because when we talk about the local government there, they have granted Forest Rights Acts in the name of community forest reserves. Right, we have recently studied the Forest Rights Act in the previous Analysts, and we have seen that one of the rights that the people get is a community forest right, that once the Gram Sabha denotes a community having forest rights, the entire community will be getting the same. And here the Maharashtra government has given thousands of hectares of forest land to the local people. And the very first step towards economic empowerment is giving land rights. So that is where this is properly implemented via sustained amount of income via bamboo sales, right? Also, these bamboo plantations is helping drive climate change mitigation, because you know bamboos and various other crops, they take in excess amount of carbon dioxide. They try to sequester carbon dioxide from the environment. And at the end of the day, government has also approved almost 30 hectares of sacred groves in the region. So these sacred groves not only preserve the environment, they also look for the spiritual upliftment of the people. So this local incident of Panchgaon is giving us a very important message, that we need to have democratic decentralization when we talk about forest conservation as a whole, and when we talk about Western Ghats conservation in a nutshell. Now, here, this kind of case studies are extremely important to be used in your mains answer writing. So never forget to note this down right now in your notes. Now, when we talk about the way forward, we have to follow the full implementation of the Forest Rights Act in the various other parts of the Western Ghats areas. Next, when we talk about the data which the forests institutes, the forest departments are not having, we need to update it with Google Earth, with open access GIS, right, and various other satellite mapping, so that we get to know where the issue lies in this region. Next, the democratic decentralization following the Panchgaon model is a must, because if people like them can become millionaires, we have so many scope according to the various other people and their livelihood in the entire region of Western Ghats. Fourth, we have to build ecologically sensitive industries. As we have seen the cases of Grasim Industries, which is polluting the local rivers there, we have to transform those industries into more sustainable industries that actually fit into the grander ecological scheme of the region. And at the end of the day, we have to adopt nature-based solutions. For example, for the degraded lands, we can use geotextiles to improve the quality of the land, because these geotextiles actually ensure that this blend with your natural environment, this decompose with the natural environment, and they give rise to the native species also, right? The loss of native species of plants are extremely harmful. And also we have seen over a period of time how various alien invasive species have increased in these areas, which is leading to the degradation of the local ecosystem. So that is why we need to use nature-based solutions for the preservation of the Western Ghats. Now, there is a question for you all again. You can attempt this. Now, I will be showing you 3 PYQs here related to Western Ghats. You mention them in the comments below. Now, on to the simplified articles. Guys, you all know that recently there was a tragic incident in Kolkata again regarding the gang rape incident. And in this one, the National Commission for Women have actually represented the incident there on ground. So, we need to look into the various provisions of the National Commission for Women from the perspective of GS2 statutory bodies. When we talk about the National Commission of Women, we have to know it about in great details, because it can be extremely important for prelims and mains both. Firstly, it was established in 1992, and it was established via an act known as the National Commission for Women Act 1990. So it makes it a statutory body where the main objective is obviously to safeguard the constitutional and the legal rights of women. Now here in this topic, mainly we have factual information. Firstly, understand the composition of the National Commission for Women. It composes of a chairperson who must be committed to the cause of women. Now here there are 5 other members who must have expertise in law, trade unions, education, administration, health, or other voluntary institutions. And also here, at least 1 member must be from the SC and ST community. Next, there must be a member secretary who must be expert in management skills or sociological skills, or should be a civil servant. Now, according to the Act, the tenure for the members, please remember, is 3 years. And they can only be removed by the central government only on the grounds of insolvency, incapacity, misconduct, or moral turpitude. Now, again, I am repeating, these are factual information where you have to just keep this in mind for your examination. The recent chairperson here is Srimati Vijaya Rathkar, where she is heading the NCW, whose main and key functions and initiatives are described here. So, the key functions here is that they can investigate women's rights, violations, and provide legal safeguards to women in form of legal advice, counsel, and so on. Also, they can report it annually to the central government, and this is actually a very necessary thing because their reports are taken seriously by the government. Also, whatever reports they are releasing, they can also give recommendations according to the various legislation norms and the amendments that are needed for the betterment of the women in the country. They can also take up various complaints, either on, say, the complainant side, or sometimes in cases of any news events or news reports, they can also initiate the complaint on their own. That is a suo motu case. They can also promote various research awareness and gender sensitization drives via awareness campaigns, seminars. As you can look here, this is actually a seminar program at Raipur that took place on 5th June 2025. And also, if you can see, there are so many initiatives in this seminar. Apart from this, they have also launched various other initiatives such as conducting gender audits across states and the UTs. And they have taken so many suo motu investigations over a period of time. They have also reviewed and proposed amendments to the Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961 and various other crimes against women in even the recently amended criminal acts. And at the end of the day, initiatives such as Parivarik Mahila Lok Adalats, Jammu and Kashmir Ladakh Cell, where the women in these areas are also taken care of by the NCW, and the legal awareness campaigns and seminars, which, as you can see here, are conducted from time to time. And at the end of the day, they also advise on the socio-economic progress that women in India must be having. So this was all for this one. But when we talk about the NCW, mainly they are not too powerful when it comes to enforcing their decisions because their advices or their recommendations are not binding on the government. So that is why in mains answers you can actually write about the criticism regarding the powers and the authorities of the NCW in this manner. Now on to the next one. Due to recent geopolitical instances, we have seen how China has been aggressive in the critical minerals race. China has also been aggressive when it comes to the supply of fertilizers to various countries including India. Mainly the prices of various fertilizers have increased in recent times, which is the main thing that we are going to look in this article. Now, when we talk about the recent case of increase in fertilizer prices, here we have to understand China's role. But at the very beginning, we have to take the case of the diammonium phosphate. Now, here, this consists of around 46% phosphorus and 18% of nitrogen. And here, mainly when we talk about the usage, it is mainly used before sowing, right, of the particular crops. And when we talk about the consumption in India, urea is at rank 1. When we talk about the usage of nitrogenous fertilizers in the country, which is hugely used in the Indian farms, right, after that we have the DAP. And when we talk about the supply of DAP, it is mainly on the imports that we are reliant upon because 55% of India's DAP is actually imported and mainly from China. When we talk about the imports from China in recent times, from 2023 to 4 to recently 5, we have seen how this figure has decreased to 0. And I literally mean 0 because, you know, the trade war which China is fighting with the US and vice versa, right, that has impacted so many other countries in so many other sectors, including fertilizer sector, right. So here, the main impact of the particular US and China trade war has seen the rise in domestic demand of DAP because simply they are having shortage of supplies, and that is why this rise in demand has also led to the rise in prices of the same. And also when we are talking about the electric vehicles in recent times, they also need phosphates for the various battery development and various other critical components. Now, this diversion of phosphorus towards EV manufacturing in China, that has also led to the reduction in the stocks of the same. Next, according to experts, this also seems to be a geopolitical strategy because China, you know, always try to leverages its various strengths and weaknesses. So if it is actually having a strength in the fertilizer industry, so it will be using it for its own political considerations. And at the end of the day, we have trade war, right? So this is actually how China intentionally in recent times, according to various reports, have reduced their exports of DAP to various other countries. So right now, it is not like that Indians are only dependent on DAP as of now. Indian farmers and industry has moved beyond that to various alternative fertilizers such as APS, which is known as the ammonium phosphate sulfate, which is having the NPKS ratio in the form of 20:20:0:13. So this means that this is an alternative kind of a fertilizer. In recent times, as you can see here, this has been increasing marginally but steadily. Correct? So right now the farmers are increasingly moving on to the alternates of the DAP because simply we are not having enough of them and we have to diversify. Also, there are various NPKs, other complexes in various combinations, in various ratio, such as one ratio can be 10:26:26:0. Those sales are also increasing over a period of time. We also have the single super phosphate, correct, which is having 16% phosphate and 11% sulfur, which is kind of very cheaper for the farmers. So the main benefit here is that we have lower phosphorus content, which means that we are wasting less. So already we are dependent on imports, so we have to reduce our wastage, right? Also, the next point is that these alternative fertilizers are having sulfur, which are extremely good for oil seeds, for pulses, for onion, chili and various other crops, which India is also aspiring to become a leader in. At the end of the day, it emerges our need for balanced nutrition for the crops. So here, a strategic analysis, an easy one, will be helping you to understand what it actually have in store for India. Firstly, India is trying to shift towards alternative fertilizers, so that we are actually talking about using extremely limited phosphate rock reserves as we have in the country. When we look here, we only have around 107 to 71 to 31 million tons of phosphate in West Bengal, Jharkhand, Meghalaya respectively. These reserves are extremely low. These are much more higher in China. So we are trying to judiciously use them by shifting to other fertilizers, and it will be also saving our foreign exchange money. Next, this hidden subsidy burden is actually very high. When we talk about the subsidies that the government of India provides for food, fertilizers, fuel, they have been going down, and government right now is trying to manage its finances by not spending too much money in these things. That is why a surge in DAP prices means that fertilizer subsidy spikes will be seen, right? And this fiscal pressure will be there. But in recent times, as you can see, the trends of the allocations for funds for fertilizers are going down. And this is also something which India is becoming very strategic by alternating the fertilizers. And at the end of the day, the agronomic wisdom will be preserved because, in India, simply we have too much of groundwater pollution, river pollution, eutrophication issues due to overuse of fertilizers, which can save the soil nutrient if we try to migrate to these alternative ones. And at the end of the day, the geopolitics cannot be ignored. We are trying to aim for self-sufficiency in fertilizers by 2032. Remember this date for your mains answer writing. So this self-sufficiency must be gained by India in this time, and we cannot do if we are still dependent on countries such as China for DAP or for various other imports. So that is where now we have to move on to the next one. Guys, in the recent times, the airline industry is in the news because of the recent crash that we have seen. Now here, this article is talking about the technology of the global air and sea transportation system in the form of GPS and the recent issues that we are seeing with GPS interference, which is extremely important for your general science and awareness in the fields of information technology. See guys, basically we know how GPS works. You have your smartphone, you turn your location on, you click Google Maps, you can find your accurate locations because there are constellations or a collection of satellites, outside the earth in the outer space who is constantly trying to monitor and track your location if you are switching your location on. So it can actually try to pinpoint your location based on the arrangement of the satellites here. And here across the entire world we have the USA who have their own GPS system, right? In fact, the name GPS is coined by the US. In Russia it is known as GLONASS. Right? In EU, it is known as the Galileo, and in China, it is actually the Beidou. So in India also we have our own GPS in the form of Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System. Now this is also known as NAVIC, which is a constellation of satellites which is actually trying to provide various applications such as navigation, such as locations, such as precise timing and various other applications here, right? While the American GPS satellites, they use 24 satellites, right? But here in IRNSS we need only 4 satellites which are always in geosynchronous orbits, right? And obviously when we talk about the utility of IRNS, this is extremely useful, and also this was recently deployed in Operation Sindoor. Right? Now, when we talk about the constellation here, we have 4 geosynchronous satellites and we have 3 in geostationary orbits. Now, we have our own satellite system. The satellite system is working fine. When it comes to GPS, the GPS is also a kind of a technology which is integrated in the IRNSS, that is also working fine. But where is the issue? The main issue is actually the occurrence of this kind of news. Recently an oil tanker collided near the Strait of Hormuz because the oil tanker witnessed GPS interference. Also, the Air India Delhi to Jammu flight returns without landing because of a GPS issue. And also recently, according to various reports, right, there have been around 700 instances of GPS interference. Now let us understand how this GPS interference works at all. So this is actually working via these 2 kind of incidents. Firstly, when we talk about GPS interference, we have the 2 cases of spoofing and jamming. Spoofing means that you are faking the signal. That means if your real position is this, right, but you want to show the authorities that your position is a fake one. So you are trying to manipulate the satellites, and the satellites will be giving you a fake position using sensitive equipments, obviously. This is the first one. Now when we talk about the jamming, that means you are not allowing the satellites to take your location. That means you have installed a jammer, a device which is blocking the signals of the GPS satellites. So recently these 2 events have seen increases in use across the world, in aviation industry, in maritime industry, in road traffic sectors, where there have been so many risks which are associated with this. So this is where we have to understand how aircraft and ships are tackling with these cases. In aircraft, there are various systems such as inertial navigation system, which means that you are trying to have the gyroscopes and the accelerometers fitted within the aircraft, and you're trying to manage with that, right? We also have the VOR DMA systems, which are ground based radio systems which can assist you without using any GPS, right? Because in GPS the jamming and spoofing is becoming much more prominent in form of GPS interferences. Also, the pilots have access to instrument landing system, which is a totally manual control of the aircraft that the pilots can have without relying on those GPS systems. Also, the pilot trainings have been recently done on this kind of interferences, and the control room monitoring is also one aspect where the DGCA is looking at the various air traffic controls and even within the cockpits as to how they are actually behaving with the GPS technologies, and if at all there are small instances of GPS interferences being detected. Now at the ships, the ship captains actually also can avoid GPS by having manual steering. They can also use terrestrial navigation such as following the lighthouses, buoys or radars, which are kind of old, but still the old systems work perfectly when we talk about this kind of inferences with the GPS satellites. Also, they can go for automatic identification system in cases of any jamming incidents or spoofing incidents. There are sophisticated technologies fitted in the ships which can detect any kind of illegal activity, and also the radar plotting can be seen on the radars of the ships itself. So here these are all the ways where the ships and the aircrafts are trying to bypass the GPS system or taking proper actions without using this particular technology, because this technology can be led to various illegal activities too. So now let me take you through 2 PYQs from 18 and 23. Especially, you must be solving this PYQ in the comments below. Now on to the next one. Guys, in this article we are going to look at the synthetic Genome project. Now this is actually an evolved version of the Human Genome Project. We are just going to look at it from the perspective of general science and awareness of biotechnology. Now in 1990s onwards, the entire scientists of the biotechnological fields, they wanted to map the human genome. Now the human genome is nothing but the entire set of our genetic material. We know that we have the cells, within the cells we have the nucleus, and here within the nucleus and surrounding them we have the chromosomes. Now chromosomes are actually consisted of several strands of various components that we know as genes, and genes are made of DNA, which is the basic material of our living world. Because you know that in DNA we have so many base pairs. If we take to attribute it, it can run into 3.1 billion base pairs in the form of ATGC. The full form you let me know in the comments below. Now from 1990 to 2003, there was an entire worldwide exercise to map our genes. That means almost 2,800 global scientists collaborated, and across 6 major nations were done, where DNA samples were collected from various individuals. Now these DNA samples were actually copied in various segments, and after these copies they were broken down into these kind of segments. Now these segments or sequences are arranged in a correct order, and this order is then assembled, and this, if you can see here, we have A, T, G, C, A, and this sequence will be going on. This means that this is your map. That means for entire individuals, right, there will be one genetic map for each and every person. That means you can almost identify that with a fingerprint that you have. That this is where we have tried to cover 92% of the entire human genome. Right? Yet we did not attempt fully in this Human Genome Project, but 92% of the human genome was mapped in this manner, and the data was made freely available for everyone. Because of that, right now we are now having personalized medicines. That means we know that many individuals carry genetic diseases, and in cases of any genetic diseases, we generally do not have various generic medicines for them. For those people with genetic diseases, we have to target their genes and remove the disease portion via personalized medicines. And this Human Genome Project is giving rise to such of them. Also, it has given rise to various new technologies such as the CRISPR technology. You can explain that in the comments, because we have covered this in the Analyst previously also. Also, this has given rise to various other scientific revolutions, such as from cell culture, tissue culture, and so on. And that has also given rise to the new project, which is known as the Synthetic Human Genome Project. Now this genome project is actually where we are trying to build large segments of human DNA artificially outside the human body. This is a study which has been led by Oxford, Cambridge and Crick Institute. Funding is around 10 million Great British Pound. What here, the main difference here is actually here in the Human Genome Project, we are actually reading the genome. We are actually breaking in the sequences and we are trying to reading the same. But in this Synthetic Human Genome Project, we are trying to write the entire genome by ourselves in our laboratories. We are going to, build the synthetic DNA from scratch by actually, having proper genes, chromosomes built using, sophisticated technologies in laboratories. Then we will be inserting them into a living cell, and we can actually have various animals such as pigs, where we can actually incorporate the cell into their bodies, and we can also in the future maybe have proper heart, liver and corneas and various other organs from these particular cells themselves. So this is how we can actually try to understand the benefit of this particular project, which will take a particular amount of time. But this project can also lead to something which we know as xenoplantation. Xenoplantation is actually the growing of artificial organs in other organisms for human needs and human transplantation. So this is how this will be following an active biodesign by actually incorporating them in the various animals and their bodies, and it will be using creative engineering focused applications. So that is where this holds promise. but we have to see how this is spanning out over the years. Now, on to the final article. Yesterday, our Prime Minister delivered an excellent episode of the Man Ki Baat, where he talked about so many incidents, starting from the emergency to various other policy imperatives, where he also declared that the WHO, the World Health Organization, in recent times have declared India to be Trachoma-Free. Now, when we talk about trachoma, this is actually a bacterial disease which affects our eyes. This is an infection which is caused by the chlamydia bacterium, which causes inflammation around our eyes. And here, this infection affects mainly women and children, and more common in poverty-stricken regions, because this bacteria generally thrives in various unsanitary and dirty places across the world, which is why they are also known as neglected tropical diseases. And this was actually a part of the WHO 2020 program to eliminate trachoma. And here there are various other countries which achieved the same feat like India, such as Morocco, Mexico, Iran and Cambodia. Now, how did India eliminate it? Firstly, because of a WHO strategy known as the SAFE strategy, which stands for surgery, antibiotics mainly by azithromycin, facial cleanliness and environmental improvement. So, if there is a question, please remember this approach. Next, the government of India has also taken various initiatives such as the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan in proper cleanliness, also the Jal Jeevan Mission by ensuring sanitation and other measures are provided to the people. We also have the same under a mission of National Program for Control of Blindness and school health programs, which have tried to eliminate, track this particular disease, and finally we are on a right track. So, I thank you all for being a very patient audience. Please do attempt the quiz which is following up. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.